we're dealing fundamentally here with the kind of Anglo-American, super wealthy kind of financier, super wealthy industrialist class. These are the ones really at the top of the pecking order. So when we see those kinds of names, or DuPont and Ford and many others, they were involved in helping to fund Hitler, in helping to finance the electrification of the Soviet Union, for example. And they were also involved in the so-called business plot of 1933, which was an attempt to overthrow liberal democracy in the United States and replace it with fascism. And it was only because of General Smedley Butler that that plot was foiled. So we know the kind of people that we're dealing with here, or the kind of class, I should say, that we're dealing with here. And the reason why totalitarianism is so beloved of this class, and always has been, is because it offers the most ruthless and brutal means and most efficient means of keeping the working class in check and suppressing it and removing any threat to the rule of the ruling class. So it's no accident that all of this is coming back, because the desire to destroy liberal democracy is already 9 decades old on their part. They haven't always got their way, of course, over the course of time. But now that the previous paradigm of rule seems no longer fit for purpose, they're clearly trying to replace it now with biodigital technocracy. Now, coming back to the kinds of technologies that have been developed and are being utilized here, again, we have to ask questions about the origins and the original purpose, in fact, of the internet. Because originally it was conceived as the ARPANET, which came into being in 1969, which was just 1 year after, as you just mentioned, Operation Phoenix in 1968. So I think you mentioned Kees van der Pijl earlier as well. His book, States of Emergency, he has a useful, if frightening, term, the information liquidation model. And he says this is what was applied in Vietnam through Operation Phoenix. It was also applied on a much wider scale in 1965 in Indonesia. And it involves infiltration to obtain information about the kind of key organizers, who can then be targeted for assassination via assassination squads. So we already know that this was a tactic in the mid-20th century. And van der Pijl argues that the ARPANET, from the beginning, was intended to have a counter-revolutionary function. So did the internet just kind of pop up out of nowhere in the 90s for the good of mankind? Not really. And it's always, I think, been intended as this kind of, well, the clue's in the name, isn't it? The web, the net. It catches all of us up. It ensnares us. There's seemingly no way out of it today. So it's no surprise that when you fast forward over time, the kind of rise of social media and so on, and smart devices, which have got the large majority of the population literally addicted to those products, and by design as well. I mean, the Facebook vice president for research, I forget his name, but he came out years ago and talked about how they knew when designing this that notifications and likes and so on trigger dopamine hits in the brain. It's literally a chemical reaction to keep people hooked. So now that they've achieved that, and they've got everybody completely hooked up to this technocratic control grid already, in a sense, just via the smart devices, it doesn't take a wild stretch of the imagination to go where Klaus Schwab, for example, goes in his 2016 book. So this is 8 years ago now. And in there, he says people are already carrying these devices around with them all the time. The next step is for this kind of technology to go under the skin. And as always, it's always sold in terms of convenience and making life better and so on. But this takes us smoothly back to the IT bio-nano era idea. And again, it's a military concept. All of this that we're discussing really has military origins when you trace it all back. And if you can achieve what they are evidently trying to achieve in the coming years, in terms of connecting all human bodies up to an external network, then the potential for total social control is absolutely gigantic and potentially irreversible.